Hi there, this is Lars Sloan with American Bagpipes. You're listening to the amazing 25th Hour radio show with Rob and Randy.
Lars, let's talk a little bit about your beginnings.
Okay.
How did you get into bagpiping? I mean, that's a pretty generic question, but
Yeah.
how did you get into it?
That's the most often asked question I've ever had in my whole life, too.
Thank you so much.
It was not just how, but it was also why. Well, my background is Scottish. My great-great-grandparents came over from Scotland. And my father, God bless him, who grew up in Kentucky, wanted to learn how to play pipes when he was a young man, but he couldn't find a teacher. So I guess he always put it in the back of his head that if he had a boy, he was going to do his best to get him involved in bagpiping. The story goes, according to my dad, we were living in Detroit at the time. We moved the family up there to get in with GM. I was 5 years old. And are you familiar with the traveling band called the Black Watch? You ever heard of them?
I haven't, but I'll definitely be looking them up.
Pretty famous bagpipe and drum corps that represents Scotland. They travel across the world every few years and put on big concerts. And they've been doing this for years and years and years. So when I was 5 years old, my dad took me down to see the Black Watch. They were coming through to play in Detroit. And so I went down there, and I remember exactly what happened the whole time. You know, the start of the show, that big drum roll, and that big guy in the front with the staff, the drum major, and hundreds of pipers came walking out. And it just blew me away. My father said that was the first time in your whole life you ever shut up.
Well, I mean, that's a pretty visual thing there. So many guys coming out blowing bagpipes.
But I was, like, enthralled by this. And so after the show, he said, "You really like it?" And I said, "Yes." He goes, "Well, how would you like to learn how to take lessons for that?" And I said, "Yes, yes, 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 yes." I was really excited. Well, he did his best to find a bagpipe teacher in Detroit back in the late 50s. And so by the time I hit 6 years old, he still hadn't found a bagpipe teacher. So he was going to get me started on something. And what did he choose? Accordion.
Oh, yeah.
I remember when I was 6 years old going to this accordion class. And there was three other young men in the class. They're all older than me. They were probably like maybe 8, but they all looked older and bigger to me. I remember the first time I sat down and the instructor sat this full-size accordion in my lap. It was like holding a piano because I was only 6 years old and I was a small guy anyway. But I kind of remember taking lessons for a few months and I did pretty well. Actually, I think I surpassed the other 3 on the accordion. So I guess this has proven to my dad that I had some kind of talent. And he kept looking and he finally found through a friend of his from Scotland at work whose son was taking lessons from a man named Walter Rose, who was a very well-known piper that just moved over from Scotland to work in the auto industry, and he also started teaching bagpipes. So I got hooked up with Walter Rose. And when I was 7 years old, I took my first bagpipe lesson.
So did you just jump? Did you just jump into it naturally? I mean, when you first started playing, it was heritage, obviously. But
yes.
When you first started playing it, did you think, I don't know if I want to play pipes or not?
Well, I was so hooked on what I remembered seeing at the Black Watch that I knew that that's what I wanted to do. It's like, God put it in my heart. You're going to be a bagpiper. Now, of course, I didn't think like that back in those days, but I was so attracted to it that when I got that practice chanter in my hand and I went and took my first lesson, I used to go home and practice late at night under the sheets so I wouldn't keep my family awake playing that practice chanter. I loved taking lessons. So it came natural to me.
At what point? I'm sorry. Go ahead.
That's all right. I was going to say, there's three things that's involved if you're going to be good at practically anything you do in life. If it comes down to being physical, like a tennis player or baseball or a musician, you got to have three things going for you. First of all, you got to have some kind of talent towards that goal. Second is you have to have a really good teacher. And the third thing is you have to start young. And if you visualize like these Olympic gymnasts, they all start just before they can start walking, they start jumping around and doing backflips and things. So it's similar to that. But so I got all three blessings, and I grew up playing the bagpipes. And I've been doing it since I was 7 years old.
Well, at what point in your life did you realize that this was going to be something that you was going to be doing, forever and for a living as income?
Well, by the time I was 10 years old, I was pretty good at what I was doing. Where the word got out that there was this young kid, it was pretty impressive for a young kid that played a bagpipe that was bigger than him, that could actually go do things, and we called them back in those days engagements, like I would play for a wedding, or I would play for somebody's funeral or something like that. But back in those days, they would give me $5 when I did it, but to me, that was superb. I was doing it because I loved it, not just to make money on it. So I got that feel for it at a young age, but I really didn't apply my gift of playing the pipes to actually make a living until I moved to Houston, Texas. And I moved down here in 1981. I was going to be a commercial diver, but that's a whole different story. But in 82, some people found out through mutual friends that I was a piper and a pretty good one at one time in my life. And they started bugging me, hey, get your pipes out and come down and play with this band. Well, let's go out and do that. And then the word got out. And then I was getting calls from people that wanted to learn. So it was so fast and so furious that I opened up the Hamilton School of Piping in Houston, Texas in 1982. And from that point on, I've been doing it as my pretty much sole means of income.
So now you brought up an interesting subject. You were talking about, even though you pipe, you also did some other things to bring in some income. You mentioned commercial diving, but you also did, would you say special effects or
yeah.
Ray,
I've done so many different things in my life. People don't believe me when I start to list them.
Well, throw a couple things out that would be hard to believe.
Well, what got me in, let's take special effects in the motion picture industry. I got into that through a mutual friend of mine. We had a little Scottish-Irish band that used to play out at the Texas Renaissance Festival. And one of my hand drummers, J.W. McCormick, was a special effects technician. He'd been doing it for a long time. Well, when I was still a young kid in Detroit, right out of school, I did a couple of things. I discovered plumbing. I got into plumbing for a while. I learned how to be an electrician. I also got into welding, and I really liked welding. Yeah, I really enjoyed it. It was a talent that you take with you after you learn it.
Oh, sure.
Well, J.W. came to me one time and said, did you mention you were a welder at one time? And I said, yeah. He says, well, I got a job for you. We're doing a movie down here. It was being filmed in the city of Houston. Chuck Norris movie. I think it was called Sidekick. Anyway, they were doing some explosives in the ground, and they needed mortars to plant these explosives and make them look like big bombs were going off. But even though they're planted in the ground, these mortars had to be welded very well. So JW brings some steel over to this little. I had a little garage with a shop in it. I used to tinker. I like making things, little wagons, whatever. And so I welded up these probably 3 foot tall mortars, and I made 3 of them. It took me a couple of days. He took them out to the set, and his superior was so impressed with the welding of these mortars that he started sending some more work my way to be welded from the show. Next thing you know, he called me out on the set and asked if I wanted to just kind of be involved with the rest of this movie and stay there and be the welder and fabricator for a lot of the stuff they were doing. And I said, sure. And that's the door that opened up for me in special effects. That guy's name was Kenny Speed. He was the effects coordinator on many big movies, but he also did Walker, Texas Ranger.
Oh,
for
one of my favorite
about
shows.
7 seasons. Yeah, and I worked on Walker for 2 seasons through Kenny, and that's how I got into the special effects side of things.
Well,
I already had some knowledge in electrical work and anything mechanical. The only thing I didn't have was explosives, except for the stupid things I used to do as a kid with black powder and things like that.
well,
But he took me under his wing and taught me that stuff, and the rest is history.
well, let me ask you this, man. Being involved with the movies like that, did you ever get any walk-on roles or anything like that?
Actually, I did one time. I got a role. I was working on a movie. It was a Clint Eastwood movie called Perfect World. Clint Eastwood, Kevin Costner, Laura Dern.
Mm-hmm.
And there was a flashback when Kevin Costner's character flashed back into his childhood. And it was the scene, it never made it to the movie. And I was telling everybody, you got to go see this movie when it came out. It was clack. It was like, oh, and they were laughing at me. Anyway, but it was a good scene. To me, it was. Where they went back in time, and it was like this brothel almost kind of. And they had this old band playing in this really smoky old bar atmosphere.
Mm-hmm.
And they had an upright bass player. They had a guy in a squeeze box, some guy playing some kind of a hand drum, and then me on the bagpipes. And so
you got to incorporate your love into the movies.
I did. It was amazing. And Clint Eastwood, while we were setting up for that, he's a musician himself. He's a very good piano player. He probably plays other things. But we started talking just before they were setting the scene up. And so I got my pipes out, and he said, "What key are you playing?" And I said, "This and that." And he says, "Well, go get him. Let's play something." And so I got to jam on set with Clint Eastwood on the piano and me on the bagpipes.
That is ridiculous. That is ridiculous. Yeah. Did you ever have the opportunity to jam with any other stars like that had hidden talent? Because I didn't know that about Clint Eastwood.
Yeah. I've played for Willie Nelson, Chris Christopherson, and Kinky Friedman. We're doing a show out in Austin one time. And I got to open up for these guys. And I went up on stage in my jeans and cowboy boots and a cowboy hat and opened up playing the Cotton Eye Joe on the stage full of Willie Nelson fans. That was insane.
Yeah, that sounds amazing. What about, I'm looking on your website here, and I'm seeing all of these pictures with all these major stars, and then I'm seeing you sitting there with Sandra Bullock, and it looks like you're at a birthday party or something. What's going on there? I mean, are you really close with Sandra?
That's the shot you from on my website?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, I was doing, actually, craft service on that show. A friend of mine called me up and said, "Hey, what are you doing the next couple months?" I said, "Nothing, really. Come on out to Shreveport. We're shooting the movie, and you're going to help me do craft service." And so I went out and worked on this movie the full time. And Sandra is just a sweetheart. She is so down to earth. And I was doing her craft service, and I would bring her stuff wherever she wanted all throughout the day. And we became pretty good buddies. And then one day, as a surprise, that birthday cake was for Menin Yappo, who was the director of the film. And her and the director are very good friends. He's German. So if you look really close at the cake, it says something, "Happy birthday to you" in German on it. I'm not sure what it says.
Yeah, I was trying to understand. I was trying to read that. I couldn't figure it out either.
Well, as craft service was delivering the cake, I got out the bagpipes, and the coordinator for craft service was Liz Landers. Her and I go way back. I piped in the cake. And we did it when everyone was sitting around, not in the middle of a shot, and everyone was on set. And Sandra was there, and most of the rest of the characters and all the crew. And we piped up his birthday cake to the Toonskow and the Brave. And when we got there, I broke into "Happy Birthday," and the whole crew busted out singing "Happy Birthday." And Sandra just thought that was the catch me out. And we really bonded after that.
You know what? You brought up an interesting point. You piped in the cake. Now, whenever you hear, and I don't know about everybody out there listening to this, but whenever I hear a bagpipe, I know it's time to listen. Something important's getting ready to happen. You know what I mean? Yeah. So with that being said, let's talk about Roddy Piper a little bit. Because when you hear the bagpipes during wrestling, you know what's getting ready to go down. The man himself is getting ready to come out, Roddy Piper.
Right.
You actually had the opportunity to meet Roddy Piper, right?
Yes, when we were very young.
Well, can you tell us about that experience? I mean, I know it was probably a long time ago, but, man, I've got to hear about your run-in with Roddy Piper.
Well, I grew up in the Detroit area, but the bagpipe mecca, it was all the way from Detroit all the way up through Toronto, and that neck of the woods, southeastern Ontario. And throughout the summer, there would be the Highland Games, which is all these bagpipers would go to these competitions, and they would compete in solo, compete in pipe bands. The dancers would compete, and they would have the caber toss. You're probably familiar with that, where they toss telephone poles around, basically.
Oh yeah.
And he played with a band called the City of Toronto. And at every Highland Games, all these pipers get to know each other, and they hang out afterwards in basically the beer tent after the games are over. And I got to know him just a little bit by hanging out with that crowd. I didn't know him real well. I didn't know him personally, but I knew who he was. We drank a few beers together when we were young. And then I got out of that bagpipe scene for about 10 years. I didn't go up that way until I moved down. I didn't even touch my pipe until I came back to Houston, Texas. So as time grew on, he became pretty famous, and I remember, going, "Wow, I knew that guy," but I never stayed in contact.
Well, let me ask you.
It was so amazing to watch what he did with that.
Tough guy? Is he a tough guy?
Oh yeah, but he's a sweetheart, as most of those guys probably are.
I mean, so like if I was, you wouldn't walk up to Roddy Piper talking smack, right?
No, that's
a bad idea.
Bad you imagine idea. That big, that has the guts to go out in public wearing a kilt. And he's got that attitude on his shoulder, you're like, come on, go ahead and make a comment, something like that. You can see the glint in his eye. He's just asking you, waiting for you to do something like that. So,
well, I'm glad you brought that up. I mean, you talk about segue. Kilts. Let's talk about kilts. How do you go about getting a kilt? I mean,
my goodness. Well, back in the old days, and what are the old days? Geez, to me, back in the 60s, most of the better kilt makers were in Scotland. So you had to order them from Scotland. You would send them your measurements if you couldn't, fly over there and be fitted out. But recently, a lot of just like the bagpipe players themselves and the teachers, moved to the United States to get a better life. And they brought their talents over here, too. And there's probably a dozen or so good kilt makers in this country right now. And but kilts are a wonderful thing to wear. Have you ever tried one on?
Well, not a kilt. No.
You have to do it. There's nothing better than wearing a kilt in public.
Well, I've had the hot rod shirt. That's as close as I got to the traditional. I mean, that's traditional to me. I wish I had a kilt. I almost got one when Axl was rocking one out in Guns N' Roses.
Oh, I gotcha.
I come close. I come close to getting one.
When you and I actually physically meet, it's probably going to happen one day. Mm-hmm. I'm going to bring an extra one with me, and you're going to go out with me.
Well, you better bring two of them and put them together because I'm a pretty good-sized guy. But
no problem.
It's all good. It's all good. I would definitely rock a kilt out because them are awesome. I want one of them bags, too.
Gotcha. When you wear a kilt and you have the proper attire on, accoutrement that goes with the kilt, like the jacket and the shirt. If you wear a wingtip white shirt with the bow tie,
mm-hmm.
you wear a proper jacket, which the fancier ones are called Prince Charlie jackets. That's formal wear. You wear it with a cummerbund. You can go anywhere in the world with that outfit on.
Oh yeah, well, you talk about, and that's the traditional stylings, right?
Yes.
Well, let's talk a little bit about the instrument itself for a second.
Okay.
They're starting to become modernized, aren't they? I was reading somewhere. I tried to brush up a little bit on bagpipes. They got to talking about how the traditional bag was made of animal skin, whether it was dog or sheep, or then it started talking about stitching of the leather and all this other stuff. Then I was reading somewhere where they're starting to make the bagpipe bags out of like Gore-Tex, some kind of synthetic material. How do you feel about that, and how do you feel it affects the sound of the pipe itself?
Well, it's amazing, and that's a really good question because the bagpipes have come through a big change in the past 40 years. When I was young, Gore-Tex wasn't around, so the bags were made out of two hides that worked really well in this climate and in this country. The original one was sheepskin. They would, make a bag out of sheepskin. And you had to condition that bag on a regular basis or it would leak because it was kind of a porous leather. And some of the mixture from the old country was a bit of honey and a bit of glycerin, and you dump that in the bag and you rub it around. and then you'd be sticky, and bees would be following you around.
Oh boy.
The other leather was elk hide. That was a very good leather. It lasted a long time, very durable, pretty airtight. And then it's been a while now, about close to 30 years, maybe 25, Gore-Tex, one of the pipers, somebody in the bagpipe industry, and they're always trying to improve, the bagpipe, came out with the Gore-Tex idea. And the Gore-Tex is a breathable material. For instance, you couldn't use a rubber bag because you blow the air in, it's air blown through your lungs, and there's a lot of moisture in your breath. And that moisture has nowhere to go, and it would collect on the inside as condensation, and it would just permeate your reeds, and the sound would get worse than they normally sound. So the Gore-Tex allows your bag to breathe, but it's still airtight, so you're not losing any pressure. So that was a great improvement. The reeds in bagpipes, there's things out the top are called.
You talking about in the chanter?
And then the chanter is down at the bottom where the melody comes out. And there's 4 reeds in that bagpipe, which is the reason you need a bag. You couldn't play 4 reeds at one time. But they're starting to synthesize some of the reeds. The old reeds were made out of cane. The drone reeds are a single tongue reed. Mm-hmm. In other words, they took like a 6-inch piece of maybe 3/8-inch cane, and they would wax one end of it, and they would put a split in it and called the tongue, and that's what vibrated. Okay?
Right.
And when we use cane reeds, and that's what I grew up on, and I'm glad I did because it was an experience, you have to tweak those constantly. That was one of the big things about bagpipes in the older days, and they still are now, is to keep that instrument in tune. There are so many variables. Mm. You could be having in perfect tune playing under a cloud out in the country, and all of a sudden the cloud goes away, the sun comes out, and they're going to go out of tune. You have to retune them again, so you're constantly changing those, or chasing that to keep them sound good. Now, the drone reeds, they have synthesized. They've made them out of plastic, or some of that lightweight, what do you call it, that material that they're using for all kinds of things, aircraft now. What is that stuff? I can't think of it right now. Yeah, something like that. But anyway, the reeds and drones are pretty steady now, so they'll hold their pitch a lot better than the old reeds did. But they haven't mastered making the double reed for the chanter yet out of anything synthetic. It's still made out of cane.
You talking about the drone?
The drones are synthetic.
Okay.
The reeds. But the reeds for the chanter, where your melody comes out,
mm-hmm.
that's still primarily made out of cane.
Okay.
So I want to ask you a question. Let's say I want to get into bagpiping. What's a good bagpipe? I mean, what would one cost? A good starter kit for someone out there who would be interested in playing this instrument.
Well, here's the steps and money involved if you're a raw beginner and you've never picked up a bagpipe before. You start off on a thing called a practice chanter. It's a handheld version of the chanter that you play in the bagpipe, but it has a plastic reed in it. It's easy to play. You don't have to tune it, and it's quiet. And they're also inexpensive. You can get a chanter with a beginning kit with a couple of reeds and the instructional book, and now with a CD for under $100. And you're on that for the first 6 months minimum, sometimes a year, before you even consider touching a bagpipe.
So there's
you have to learn the finger.
So is there no bag on this practice chanter?
There's no bag on this. It looks like a recorder.
Okay.
Yeah, except instead of a fipple on a recorder, it has a reed in it. But it's an easy reed. It's a little plastic reed. It doesn't take a lot of pressure to play this thing. In fact, I've got mine sitting right over here.
All right. That's what I was going to ask you if you were going to play a little bit for us.
Practice chanter. I don't know if you can hear this or not, but I'm going to play you a couple of scales. Here we go.
Yes!
You guys hear that?
Dude, that is awesome.
Really?
Yeah,
okay.
We hear that great.
It's very quiet. Like, here's the most famous tune besides Amazing Grace on the bagpipes. It's called Scotland the Brave. There you go.
That's awesome.
Okay, so you learn the finger works on that for the first 6 months or so. After you've developed that and learned how to read the music, then we go on to the bagpipe.
Let me ask you something. What's that song that goes?
I think it's called the Irish Jig.
Is that what that is?
I think. Let me see. Is this the one you're talking about?
Yeah.
Yep, Irish Jig.
Yeah, man, that's my favorite pipe song of all time.
Well, there you go.
That and when they played Amazing Grace in Highlander, that was awesome too.
Oh yeah, that's a very, very emotional song in the bagpipes.
Now, I've looked at some YouTube videos, right, researching you and stuff, and I've seen some people playing apparently your music. Now, do you compose your own songs?
Yes, I do. I've been composing about 20 years now.
So, do you have albums out that people can purchase, or anywhere to listen to these albums, or anything like that?
Yes, I do. The band that I did most of my recording with is a band called The Rogues, Rogues. And you can go to therogues.com. And the time that I spent with the band, I took a few years off. We're back together now as the original group. We released, I think 7 albums. And most of the music on all 7 of those albums is original, written by myself or another piper, Jimmy Mitchell, or one of our drummers named Randy Watkey. And it was one of those magical, we just fell upon each other. It was, the timing was right, the market was right, and the people were right to make this group successful. And we've actually written some really, really nice tunes.
Yeah. What do you think are some of your crowning achievements so far with your playing?
Achievements
as in, where has it brought you to? Now, I've heard you might have played actually for some presidents.
Oh yeah, I played for Mr. Bush. I played for Lady Bird Johnson. She actually, when her daughter was getting married, me and a good friend of mine, I got there because of my friend Mike Cusack, who's another world famous, in fact, if he's not the best pipe in the world. I can't think of who would be, but he lived down here in Houston as well. And he got a hold of me back in the early 80s when he first came down. He says, Lars, I got a gig. Let's go. So we went out to Austin. We played for, was it Lucy Baines, I think was her wedding. And Lady Bird was still there. And we were playing out front as guests were arriving. And she comes up, and she's short. She's like, to me, it looked like she was 3 feet tall, but, I don't know, 4.5, whatever. And she was smiling and just so full of energy and loved it. And she started dancing for us. And she wasn't just moving around. She was actually doing like a Highland swing type of a dance. And it was
she had been waiting on this.
It was incredible.
So what about this video you just put out when you was playing on a battleship?
Oh, I was just down there for someone actually got married down at the Texas battleship about a month ago. And I guess the fellow was in the Navy, and they met in the Navy, and they decided to have their wedding on the battleship Texas. So they got a hold of me through my website. Says, would you play? I said, sure. I went down there and played. And it was a rainy, kind of a nasty day. There wasn't a lot of people there. But the people that run, not the concession, but I guess the office people that manage what goes on down there at the ship, one of the guys that records a lot of occasions, especially big ones down there, happened to be there that day. And he came up and said, would you mind if I film what you're doing? I said, not at all. And that was something else I just stumbled into.
Yeah, that was a pretty amazing backdrop.
Yeah, it was. big old cannons right behind me. Holy smoke. That's an impressive ship. Even for something that old, you look at it in awe when you're actually on it.
Oh, absolutely. Tell us a little bit before we get off here about your business. You got your website, American Bagpipes, and what you're doing for people.
Okay. It started off as the Hamilton School of Piping back in '82, and I still do some teaching under the name the Hamilton, but I joined it together with American Bagpipes. When I first opened American Bagpipes about 10 years ago, I was going national on the website, providing pipers for whoever needs a piper. For weddings, funerals, bar mitzvahs, you name it. And people, I think I was the first one out there doing that, so people were calling me from all over the country. Well, because I've been playing for so long, and I guess I made a name for myself, good or bad, people kind of knew who I was. So if I called the city of Chicago and got a hold of the pipe man. I said, "This is Lars Sloan with American Bagpipes for their Rogue." Someone would know who I was. And I said, "I've got a job for you, and I'm going to put you in contact with the people." That's how that started. And it got really busy, and then all of a sudden I got back into the movie industry for a while. So I set that aside, and I just reduced it to the city of Houston only right now. So I provide bagpipes for the city of Houston or the whole state of Texas. For anyone who needs a pipe or for any occasion, we'll be there for you.
So you pretty much got the monopoly on bagpipes.
Well, I don't have the monopoly.
You are the man.
Out there.
You are the man. And
Simply the
I love
best.
what I do.
Simply the best. Hey, you know what? Hey, it's been such a pleasure to have you on the show, and just let us pick your brain and you know, kind of walk through time with you on where you were at, where you're going.
Well, thank you. It's my pleasure too. I've enjoyed this.
The 25th Hour Radio Show.